It seems with each passing week, there's more and more pressure on the Department of Justice to investigate former President Donald Trump for multiple crimes. In fact, multiple members of the January 6th committee have grown impatient, arguing that their hearings have turned up more than enough evidence to warrant a criminal investigation. Just listen to Republican Adam Kinzinger and Democrat Elaine Luria on the Sunday shows.
It does feel like in the last few months since we've started presenting our evidence that there is a significant amount more movement in DOJ. I certainly hope they're moving forward. I certainly think there's evidence of crimes, and I think it goes all the way up to Donald Trump.
I sure as hell hope that Merrick Garland has an open criminal investigation into Donald Trump. I mean, with what we've laid out there, with all of the information that is publicly available as well.
Which brings me to a question I've asked far too many times on this show. Where, oh where, is Merrick Garland? Despite public pressure to investigate Trump, the Attorney General has only been able to offer vague platitudes in response.
No person is above the law in this country. Nothing stops us. I don't know how to, maybe I'll say that again. No person is above the law in this country. I can't say it any more clearly than that. There is nothing in the principles of prosecution, in any other factors which prevent us from investigating anyone.
Sure, I admit there are obstacles in Garland's way, both political and legal. The Justice Department has never before launched a criminal probe into a former president. A DOJ investigation of Trump could further divide and even inflame an already polarized nation. There's also the argument that the department is supposed to be politically impartial, neutral, which would make it difficult to go after a former Republican president who might well be the 2024 GOP presidential nominee. But I'll let Charles Blow push back against those concerns with a quote from his latest New York Times opinion piece. Quote, "Can the country afford not to prosecute Trump? I believe the answer is no. He has learned from his failures and is now more dangerous than ever. He has learned that the political system is incapable of holding him accountable. He can try to extort a foreign nation for political gain and not be removed from office. He can attempt a coup and not be removed from office." And sure, you might say, Mehdi, just be patient. The Justice Department is just catching some smaller fish before they go for the white whale. There might even be some truth to that. The DOJ has taken action against multiple rioters and just prosecuted Steve Bannon last week for contempt of Congress. But the whole bottom-up approach from the DOJ has been criticized by, among others, former federal prosecutor Andrew Weissmann, one of special counsel Robert Mueller's top deputies. In a recent Times op-ed, he says about the DOJ strategy, quote, "That is actually the wrong approach for investigating the January 6th insurrection. That approach sees the attack on the Capitol as a single event, an isolated riot, separate from other efforts by Donald Trump and his allies to overturn the election. The hearings should inspire the Justice Department to rethink its myopic approach. A myopic focus, on the January 6th riot is not the way to proceed if you are trying to follow the facts where they lead and to hold people at any level criminally accountable, as Attorney General Merrick Garland promised." The longer Merrick Garland and his DOJ hold off going after Trump, the harder it becomes and the more emboldened Trump becomes. This week, the disgraced, twice impeached former president is brazenly and shamelessly returning to the nation's capital Tuesday for his first speech since leaving office. And why wouldn't he? The last one he gave in D.C. helped incite an armed insurrection on the Capitol, and he has faced no consequences for it. Joining me now, the author of that op-ed, Andrew Weissmann, former lead prosecutor in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office and former FBI General Counsel. He's now an NYU law professor and legal analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. Andrew, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Let me start by asking you this. If you had been sworn in as Attorney General of the United States in January 2021, what would you have done differently when it comes to Donald Trump? How would the last 18 months under A.G. Weissmann have looked compared to A.G. Garland?
So let me first say something that I think the Department of Justice has done well, which is the prosecutions of the people who actually physically attacked the Capitol was a huge undertaking. Those are hundreds of people, and they put together two really remarkable indictments that are awaiting trial, like one against the Proud Boys and another against the Oath Keepers, both of which are for seditious conspiracy. Those are difficult cases, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But I do think that when it comes to the investigation of the former president, to leave aside whether that results in enough evidence to bring an indictment, the investigation of the president, I do think, needed to be broader, and by all accounts seems to be something that's taken a lot of time and is proceeding in sort of starts and fits, or fits and starts and drips and drabs, to mix metaphors. And so what I mean by that is you don't want to look just at what happened on January 6th, but you also want to look at what happened in the Department of Justice.
Yes.
You want to look at what happened at the state electors. You want to talk to the vice president and find out the pressure that was put on him. And there are all sorts of aspects of what happened. And I think the sort of coup de grace that makes, I think, me and other people feel somewhat, pessimistic is when there were a lot of reports that people at the Department of Justice were taken by surprise by the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson.
You tweeted that the Department of Justice should be prosecuting Mark Meadows, should be doing more about the Mark Meadows case. It's been 7 months since he was referred to the DOJ for contempt of Congress by the House. What is your understanding of why the DOJ hasn't acted on Meadows, the former chief of staff, as they did on Bannon?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why there was not either a civil or criminal contempt. They have the ability to bring both for his refusal to testify pursuant to the congressional subpoenas. I do think that we've heard a lot of reason to put a lot of pressure on Meadows to cooperate with the committee. You'll recall the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson that the president asked Mark Meadows to speak to Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th. And those are two interesting people to have the president say, reach out to them. They were not in the administration at the time, and they were having contact with some of the groups that were attacking the Capitol. So finding out what those conversations were, both with the president and with them, is really important. So, my advice, and under, an Attorney General Weissman's scheme, there would be a lot of pressure put on him, either to make a criminal case against him, or if necessary, put him in the grand jury and force him to testify about what happened.
You make the argument, Andrew, in your Times op-ed that the DOJ shouldn't be narrowing their investigation to the riot, but to the wider coup. I would argue that they could go even wider than the election and the coup when it comes to prosecuting Trump for crimes. And I want to play you a clip of your old boss, Robert Mueller, testifying to Congress in 2019, almost exactly 3 years ago.
He left office.
Yes.
You believe that you could charge the President of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office?
Yes.
So there you have it. That was said even before the riot happened. Shouldn't the Department of Justice have charged Trump with obstruction of justice on day one of the Biden presidency based on Robert Mueller's extensive findings? I've got 10 examples of obstruction in that report.
Well, I've actually written about that. I thought it was very important to uphold the rule of law, that you can't have a view that the president of the United States is supposed to obey the rule of law and is not above the rule of law, and have the Department of Justice has a policy that you can't prosecute a sitting president. But if you then, when the president is out of office, say, well, let's let bygones be bygones, you essentially are saying the president is above the law because you can't prosecute while he's in office and you want to let things go when he's out of office. And if you allow obstruction of a special counsel investigation, what is the incentive to have another special counsel investigation? The president knows he or she could obstruct that investigation with impunity. So, it remains to see whether A.G. Garland is, going to continue the investigation of what's wrapped around the January 6th hearings, but also there's a lot of other evidence, as you point out, from the Mueller investigation of the former president's criminality.
And I just have to ask you this, Andrew. Liberals projected a lot of hopes and fantasy, some might say, onto Robert Mueller and his special counsel team. A lot of people ended up being pretty disappointed, as you know. Part of me feels like that's happening again now, with Liz Cheney in particular and the 1-6 committee. There is a danger of assuming, is there not, that some institution or entity or committee will once and for all deal with Trump, hold him to account.
Yeah, and look, there's reason to think that because the former president has dodged a lot of bullets in a lot of different investigations. One thing that, having been in the special counsel's office, one thing that we all knew was that we, as part of the Department of Justice, we could not bring an indictment against the sitting president. And I always thought that was something that should have been made clear to the American public at day one, because I do think there was that sense of disappointment. It should be noted the January 6th committee hearings, as remarkable and as tenacious as they've been, they're not going to be able to indict the former president. So that really is a question of looking at the Department of Justice and, time's ticking. There is a limited amount of time, in reality, that they may have to do this. And it's not just, at the end of a Biden administration. If Congress flips, the hearings will end and all that evidence will be turned over to, various, so-called bad guys.
Andrew, I'm glad you mentioned kind of the 1-6 committee and how it can't bring charges either, just like Mueller couldn't. On Monday morning, Congresswoman Elaine Luria from the committee tweeted out this never-before-seen testimony from witnesses about President Trump's edits to his post-riot remarks. Have a listen.
It looks like here that he crossed out that he was directing the Department of Justice to ensure all lawbreakers are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We must send a clear message. Not with mercy, but with justice. Legal consequences must be swift and firm. Do you know why he wanted that crossed out?
I don't know.
He also has crossed out, I want to be very clear, you do not represent me. You do not represent our movement. Do you know why he crossed that language out of the statement?
I don't know.
Andrew, how would you use, or is it even possible to use any of that as part of a criminal investigation?
So all of that, you need witnesses to have firsthand evidence to say that this was the president's choice and the president did this. That's something that the January 6th committee doesn't have to worry about. In other words, they can rely on hearsay. So you would need additional evidence to use this. But this kind of evidence, just like the call that the president made to Kevin McCarthy, his false tweet about the vice president agreeing with his legal theory, which was ridiculous. All of that shows the former president's intent, meaning if you can show that he's lying and making up stories and saying, oh, the people who are attacking the Capitol are Antifa, when he knew darn well that they weren't. All of that is extremely good evidence of intent on his part and belies the notion that he was just not taking action as opposed to perfectly happy to see people carrying out his plan.
I do hope that prosecutors aren't holding back prosecuting Trump because the bar is to prove he lied. Surely proving Donald Trump lied must be the easiest task in the world.